Hi, everyone. Welcome to FinFactor. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at DryRun, where you can forecast your cash flow, model scenarios, and understand the future of your business. And I'm really excited. Joining me today is Gene Hammons from Profit from ERP. And it's a great topic. This is one that I'm always interested in. I know a lot of our listeners are going to be interested in. ERPs is, how do you get something that's a really solid system for a really sophisticated business that actually works? So thanks for joining me, Gene.
Sure. Glad to be here.
So I know, like your tagline, "Profit from ERP." So I think you hit the nail on the head. If ERPs aren't selected properly for the business case and for the structure of a business and not set up right, I imagine it ends up a real sinkhole. But if it's done right, it can be just an essential tool.
Yeah, and if you don't get it right, it's not your problem because you don't have a job anymore. I mean, ERP is a mess, right? It's big, it's expensive, it's disruptive, and people don't know what they don't know when they get into it, and there are some real horror stories out there. So what we do is we act as a client side consultant to be on the client side of the table and help them with all the ins and outs and things that have gone on over the years. I mean, I looked at, I spent 15 years with the different ERP companies, right? And sometimes direct with the company, sometimes with the reseller channel, that kind of thing. But I worked on a lot of different projects for a lot of different companies. And the one thing that I noticed was that certain companies did really, really well and became success stories that they advertised on the back of the website and all the marketing information. And others, they get the system up and running and it's better than it was before, but they really don't do so well with it, right? And so what was the difference? It was the same software, it was the same consultants, similar industries. What was the difference? And I came up with what the difference is the internal team that's putting together the entire project and going through the implementation. Because if you go into one of these projects, of course, you got people from finance, you've got the CFO involved at a high level, you got the controller, in messing with everything. I shouldn't say messing with everything, working with everything. But you've also got guys in inventory and people in manufacturing and people in operations. All those guys are needing to participate and do their part of the project. So our thing is how do we train all these different individuals from all these different parts of the business to come out on the back end as a highly functional, performing team that's doing great with the ERP. And, along the way, we want to lay out, why are we doing this? Why are we spending all this money? What are we looking for here? And everybody knows there's a return on an investment or ROI. They talk about that all the time. But we want to go in and we want to look at the transaction level and see, okay, we're not needing to key in all of this information, and it's an interesting article on CFO the other day. 59% of accounting people, admit that they made serious mistakes inputting information in the last month, and the remaining ones refuse to admit it.
Exactly.
There's just going to be a certain amount of human error when you're doing that versus importing a file that's got correct information directly into the system, so that we take people from data entry specialists and turn them into accounting analysts. And all kinds of magic can happen after that, but we don't quite get into the magic part. We get into the technical part of it. We've seen, had a client about $15 million and they invested in NetSuite. And that was kind of big for them, for a company of that size. Now they're a $30 million company, right? And I was talking to them a few months back, and they said they had the same original 6 people in accounting in the business office that they had when they started. Now, this other client, works on QuickBooks and a ton of spreadsheets, right? And they get the job done. There's 13 of them, right? So, that's a lot of salaries to pay every year to avoid what 1 or 2 of those salaries would have paid for, the first year and gone on from there. But it's really easy for us to add one more person to the company. Everybody's busy, everybody's swamped. If we only have one guy to do this one area of reporting, everything's going to be fine, which I remember when I was managing and VP of administration, and we had to go back to the mainframe to get reports, right? So we got in the queue and waited and waited and waited. And here comes our new report. And it's all shiny and bright and looks just like we wanted. Oh, this is wonderful. But the data that it shows us brings up another question, right? Now we're back in the queue waiting for the next report to answer the second question. So, it's really easy to get off track there and go along with your day to day and miss the big picture for what's going on. And so what we try to do is we try to go in and we can say, okay, you're going to double in size in X amount of years. That means you're going to need twice as many people in the support areas, and we take a look at things like, hey, if we could put all of our inventory together and do annual purchase orders, we could probably negotiate 2 or 3% more, better with our suppliers. And we look at all those different things. And we look at, well, what could we do if we were not filling out these forms in triplicate? Is there areas that we could go and create more revenue? So we start looking at the revenue side and see where the opportunities are there. And then I sandbag like crazy, right? I'll see another company that cut their inventory cost by 25%, and they're similar to these guys. What I do is I go back and I can say, look, guys, we're going to, shoot for maybe 13% the second year. The first year, we're going to try and get 5%. Okay. Now that's an easy goal to make if the two processes are similar, right? And, when people come back and they see that, hey, we're succeeding, we got the program up and running, it's starting to pay for itself, makes a whole big difference. And there's about 10 steps that we go through, and it's everything from how you set up your requirements in the very beginning when you're doing business analysis and look at all the process flows, all the way to, are you going to the annual conventions where people are telling success story after success story, all of those kinds of things. And, don't just put your software in and go there. Build a network of people that you can talk to, other companies that are in the same industry that are doing the same thing you're doing. How are they getting it done? It's so much easier to pick up the phone and call and go, hey, here's a way to do it. Another thing so we call this implementation fatigue, right? Because this is a long project. You're bringing forward data from the old system. It's intensive. You're changing business processes, change management, everything like that. People are at it for 4 to 6 to 12 months, something like that. They're worn out at the end, right?
Yeah.
They just want to get on with life and get back to their regular day job. And, they'll get a process almost to the finish line, and they'll say, man, I know we saw this in the demo, but those guys, they made everything look so good. And, we've been working on this, but, the software just doesn't work that way. Actually, it does work that way. It's just not the way that you're trying to do it, right? And if you've talked to another company and they did the same thing and they've got a success story behind it, you can always pick up the phone and go, hey guys, how did you complete this last 5 yards and score the touchdown? And if you can get there, you'll stick with it and and move forward. So there's so many things like that are just little tricks and hints and stuff like that, but it adds up real quickly. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it feels like, to have a real successful implementation, it feels like it's easy for someone to say, well, I'm buying software, and then they come in and they implement, which sounds like a totally technical sort of endeavor, but it works out that it's got to be there. There's all these sort of people issues, mindset issues, training issues, adoption, change management, as so many things. It still comes down to people. As much as people like to think it's robots for everything, it's like, no, it still comes down to people, right?
And sometimes the software is just an excuse to change your business processes, and people that are resistant to change, you come back and you go, this is the way the software does it. We got to do it that way from now on. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But from the very beginning, when we're doing requirements, we're going into every department. We're asking them to show us how they do everything, and we're asking them, if you didn't have to do this onerous tasks, what could you be doing?
Mm-hmm.
And what we're doing there is we're starting to vision build of them getting an idea of, hey, if I didn't have to do inventory at the end of every week, if I only had to do that once a quarter, that would save me a ton of time. And we could, I don't know, sweep the store floors. I don't know, do something else to add value. Right.
Yeah.
And so they're not approaching it like somebody walks in the door and says, hey, here's some new software. You need to learn how to use it. They're approaching it as, I can do a better job. I can hit my goals. And that's when we start to see synergies in the internal team, right? Now, we're not talking to them about, hey, I'm going to sit here and vision build with you. But, that's the whole thing is get their ideas. If they give me an idea of how the software can help, well, then I'm going to go out and find software that achieves that goal for them, right?
Yeah.
Versus, I mean, you can't really go into any business with a pre-selected notion. You have to determine what's important to them today and in the future, and what's going to fit best in these things. Because, you have different industries, you have different concepts in the software. Some people, it was set up for manufacturing, and now they're using it elsewhere. Other people, it was set up for services and process manufacturing versus, regular manufacturing and all that type of thing. There's so many variables there that you really have to focus in on what's going to work for this particular company in this particular place. I learned one time when I, after a merger, I was in between jobs and went to work for this really small ERP company. And when this was 2011, 2012, something like that. And I go in and I go, guys, we got to fix the website. You're calling your latest version of the software the Windows version, and Windows has been around since 2003. It's kind of dated. Then I learned that the majority of their clients were using the DOS version in
Wow.
2011, and I'm thinking, oh no, this is terrible. So I spent most of my time there helping clients update to the latest version. But, the point there was every ERP, no matter if it's still in DOS or whatever, has a place, and there are people that love it, and it works great for what they're trying to do. Right. So if I come in and go, well, I know, this latest cloud version, that's the hottest cloud technology, it doesn't matter. It's what are the features that are there that are going to work for this company. So you got to be careful about that. But the people don't know. Okay. So example, this week, recruiter gives me a call and goes, hey, can you help out this client? And it said, okay, what do they need to do? Well, they a pharmaceutical manufacturer. They put the product in. They're not sure it got installed right. They want to get a new AP system. The AP system doesn't work. And okay, what's the problem with the AP system? The controller, she's had it. She can't get the checks to print, and she's going to a new AP system. And so I look at a bunch of the different options that integrate with the software they're with. And it's like, these are all the things that we've replaced in the last 4 or 5 years. They're lesser systems than what she's got, so I call the guy back and I go, what's his problem? And she goes, well, she can't get the checks to line up. And it's like, okay, that's kind of a hard thing to do, because you don't want anybody walking in the office and figuring out how to print checks and going willy-nilly, right? That's kind of a controlled process, right? But there's some things to it. And I look back at my last client, they worked on it for a couple of days and they couldn't get it, right? So they went to the consultant that was helping us implement, and they asked him, they said, can you help us with that? And so we got on, we looked at it, and he tried a few things, and there was PDFs involved and putting in logos and things like this, everything like that. And it wouldn't line up right. And So he says, well, let me work on it. And he comes back the next day and it's almost there. And we still didn't quite get it. And he says, oh, well, let me try one more thing. And he went to the, graphic artist and said, hey, can you change the logo and get it the right size for us? We input that, everything lined up, right? So it took the internal team, the consultant, a couple days, and it took a third person to do it. Now, the recruiter that called me about this said she wants one consultant that can show her all the different options out there and do the implementation and integration with this new AP system. And it's like, there's not one consultant that can do that. When we go into a ERP implementation, we've got guys that know manufacturing, and we've got guys that know finance, and we've got, we may bring in a specialist because it's a company that's got some really different SOX issues and needs to report there. And the thing about it is that the guy in manufacturing doesn't know anything about SOX, right? And the SOX guy has no idea about the FDA regulations on the pharma side in the manufacturing area, or what quality is involved with, right? And so to expect one guy to walk in and do all this is impossible. So what that poor, frustrated controller is dealing with is she's got an unrealistic expectation that one person can come in and solve this problem instantly. And I could go in and solve that problem instantly, but I'd use different consultants depending upon what the real issue is and how we would solve that type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard, even the frustration level when you've got a bad implementation and how to fix it and things like that. And those things can be fixed. That's why it's really, really important. We maintain affiliations with 4 or 5 different NetSuite teams, and we've got like 6 people that do Microsoft Dynamics, the different versions of that too, because there's certain people in certain industries that know exactly what's going on. And if you get somebody, into your donut manufacturing area that's, used to aerospace parts, it's going to be a mess, right? What do you mean humidity in the drying room has something to do with how the donuts come out? He has no idea, right? And I don't know if donuts need humidity or not, but the point is that if you get the right team in the first place, you can do it right. And here's a new thing. This hit during COVID because a lot of people were realizing that our old systems are not good enough anymore, and we've got to be able to shift and change. People that were making food for restaurants and things like that, restaurants shut down. They needed to be able to offer a retail offering and repackage everything. And they never needed a website before to do e-commerce and, all these things, right? And they need to be up, and they need to be up quick. They don't have 2 years to mess around with this. So they started saying to us, hey, we need to get somebody in here that knows this. And we started putting full-time project managers on the internal team and full-time system administrators in other places. So with a system administrator working inside, everybody turns to that person whenever they have a question. And they're going through all these training exercises and they're learning about how the system's going to work for them in their department. And they have questions and they need, help knowing which training to even go look at and all that kind of thing. So with that on-site system admin, they're building the whole team together with the idea that when they walk out the door after the implementation, one of those people is going to emerge as the new system administrator, and they're going to become the person that runs the system for them internally. But that's a big head start, right? Now, there's a cost of bringing in these people, but it's far less. It's $80 and $100 an hour people versus the $250 and $275 an hour software consultants that are doing the implementation, right? So you've got some savings there. And what we were finding out is instead of, cost overruns and projects that run over time, we were coming in quicker than projected and at, 80 and 90% of the estimated budget, which, before, there's a couple things involved in that. But before, we were used to 110, 120% of estimated budget. And these could be $200,000, $400,000 budgets. It's some big numbers. Yeah. So one of the things is when you get in and you learn about this new software. Hey, this is great. I didn't know it did this. Didn't see this in the demo. We want to do that. We want to do that. Well, that wasn't in scope. That's more than what was expected to be there. If you've got a sysadmin in there that knows what they're doing, they can say, look, that's great. Let's work on that after we get live, right? We'll see if we can do it ourselves. We'll, and another thing that we did was when somebody come in with those requests, we'd go, okay, here's the training courses that are involved around that issue. Go study the training courses and see if you can do this yourself. And they're going, that's crazy. I can't do, just go try. And they would try and they would have trouble and they would come back and we'd say, okay, now talk to the consultants that are doing it. And they'd say, oh, it's easy. What you needed to do is this, this, or this. Now we've trained this person how to learn to use the software instead of just training them to use the software, right? Big difference. Now they know that they can go back in, they can learn. And Salesforce started it out when they put their training courses online and made them free for everybody. A real story about a Vietnamese immigrant guy that found those free courses and sat there every night for 2 or 3 months and became a consultant and had a really good Salesforce practice after that. And he was self-taught the whole way. And so there's a lot of good material in there, but it does take time and you gotta know how to do it. So that's opening up some new areas to people. And so those trends have been interesting. Really what we are trying to do is avoid those cost overruns, because like the Gartner did a study years ago, and it's been replicated several times. The average cost overrun is 186% of budget, right? Now, if you're on a $400,000 project, those are the things where, people do lose their jobs and things like that. Yeah. So we want to avoid those at all costs. And, one of the things we do at Profit from ERP is day one, we're looking at the budget and we're looking at the project plan, and we're making sure we're getting our deliverables at the stage that they were promised in this plan. We don't want to start falling behind, week 2 and never catch up. We're taking action week 2 and saying, how do we, get the deliverable we were supposed to get? Is that the external consultant's fault? Have we not given them the information they needed to do this? All of that type of thing. We're working on that constantly.
I was wondering, of course, one of the biggest challenges for an organization purchasing an ERP is they likely go out and they say, okay, well, I've heard of these 3. Let's get quotes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And all they're talking with salespeople, and the salespeople are doing, and of course they believe in what they're selling, and they're in a way, it's like, are they getting the right ERP for their business, or are they getting the salesman that's the most successful and
exactly
selling the software to them? And so how I imagine, like, that's where, before we even get to cost overruns and everything, it's like, is it literally the right tool for the job? And that's where someone like you would come in, I imagine. Hey,
exactly. And the thing was, hey, let's put out an RFP. Okay, that's great. We'll ask them a bunch of questions. Does it do this? Does it do that? And, can we reverse batch entries? Yeah, sure. And they go, oh, okay, that's great. And they never ask about it again. Then they find out, yeah, you can do that. You've got to get everybody out of the system. You got to shut the system down. You got to balance these 2 modules together. And then it takes about, a day and a half to do it. Right. But the answer is yes, it can do it. Funniest story, right? Okay. Big pharma manufacturer, $400 million pharma manufacturer, and really great team. They came on, all these new finance guys and stuff like that. And they used us to go out and map all the processes to find out what was going on in this new company, because they were all brand new. Right.
Yeah.
And we ended up with Microsoft Dynamics Exapta, or they call it F&O now. Great product, everything like that. It was probably a $1.2 million project, which was better than the $5 million SAP project. But anyway, early on, they had asked, hey, can we approve purchase orders and things from our cell phone? So, if somebody's looking for an answer and we're out of the office, we can do that. And sure. Answer is yes. And so we're sitting there and we're into the project, we're into the implementation, and the guys are going, now, how do we set up this thing so we can, approve these things on our phones? And the consultant turns to us and says, oh, you have to have a Microsoft phone. Everybody started laughing because it's like, they had their iPhones, they had their Androids. They go, we're not going to use a Microsoft phone. And then Microsoft got out of the phone business. They fixed that anyway. But that illustrates how valuable an RFP is, right?
Yeah.
So what we do is we set up all of our requirements and we get people that are good in the different industries to come in. And in every demo, we try to do scripted demos, but they want to show it the way they want to show it. So we let them do that first, get that out of the way. And then we get our sheets out and we say, okay, here's the things we need to do. And we're checking things off. And we may have 100, 175 requirements or something throughout the business that are important. After the first demo, we've got that down to, 40 or 50. And after subsequent demos and we have different areas, call back in and do a Zoom demo and that kind of stuff. So that different departments, you're not, sitting there if you're in finance listening to all the inventory guys, but we go through that until we are satisfied that, yes, we've seen it do all of these things and our requirements list. And, usually we get down to the final 3 candidates and each one of those requirements lists is now 10 things long. And sometimes that means we need an additional module, a third-party product. And now we're getting into how well does this software work with third-party products? How easy is it to connect? All that kind of stuff. Which is, important because everybody's connecting something to the ERP system and the ones that are easy to work with, that's key moving forward. Right. So we're doing that instead of an RFP, which, just doesn't, if you're buying desks or capital equipment, everybody's desks are the same. They got a flat surface on top. They got drawers on the sides. ERP has more differences than that. It's not the same thing. Right. Yeah. So using your standard purchasing practices when you're trying to reconfigure your business and do, a technology project and a business consulting project and revamp the entire company, it can't be answered with an RFP. So we do a 20-question RFP. Are you in this industry? How many other clients do you have doing this that are same as us? Who will be the implementation team? Simple things like that. That's just kind of to get some of the big questions out of the way. I'm not going to bring somebody to the table having known them to work in a different area and having worked with them before. That's not going to be able to do the project, right? So we know they're good going in from past experience, but we also are going to check off all our requirements and let our requirements finish the thing out. Sometimes there's, an extra module and integration costs and things like that. We know that going up front, we're okay. When it's a surprise halfway through, now we're talking cost overrun and scope creep, right? Yeah. So that's important. That's critical.
How do you deal with, as soon as you mention RFP, I'm just like, oh, the hair on the back of my neck stands up, we see how flawed a lot of times that is. And I'm sure there must be times that you're going into an organization and they probably have some guidelines that they run by. Maybe that it's like, maybe it's even like we have to go with the lowest bid, or some are, we have to go within a certain percentage of the lowest bid, or right. Or they've got some other criteria that it has to be located in X or Y or whatever. How do you deal with it when you just kind of go, yeah, you know what? They don't match up with the best system, and your lowest price will be your highest price because of your use over the next 10 years is going to be like ballooned, right? How do you deal with some of those issues?
So that's back into the cost revenue model, right? We're going through and we're looking at all the transactions. We're looking at the potential savings there. Then we bring in the software. Now we're going to look at the cost, right, of the software. We're going to look at, how much of it is then the implementation, how much of it is the annual licensing. We're going to look at, do they have a record. I mean, like if you go with Workday, you can just take their estimates and go X 1.5 because they always run over, right? I've never heard of anybody not running over with Workday, but some of these other ones, NetSuite, we know they could come in pretty low. So you can say, okay, they probably can do that, right? And then you start looking at all those requirements being checked off, right? And you're looking at, okay, these guys have an automated, whatever function that we hit a button, it's done. These guys make us go through 20 hours of work here and 10 hours of work there, and we've got to fudge things, right? We start taking the cost of that. What is the cost of the labor involved in doing it the different way? And oh, these guys are missing this one feature that's going to save us a lot of money over here. So now we're comparing total cost of ownership with one software product versus the next one, right?
Yeah.
Now, all of these numbers are, I had one client that we were in there for 18 months, and we got those numbers very close to what was going to happen. Most of my clients are in the smaller area. And so, we do our work long enough that we're not running up a lot of billable hours, that we know that we've got, okay, so here's some value, and compared to this value, we can see this one's more valuable to us, right? And, we could spend 6 months tightening those numbers up. And a lot of the companies do after we leave. One of the things that we do in the cost revenue model is we have all the input numbers highlighted in yellow. So if we're saying an accounting clerk is $30 an hour or whatever, and somebody goes, we only pay our clerks $15 an hour or whatever. Okay, go change the input right there. It flows through the formula. It changes everything up all the way through the model, and allows them to play with it. And I had this one client, I told you they'd been the $15 million company, and we did the cost revenue analysis, and we said, you're going to be able to save $7 million over 3 years, right? And they were very interested in it, and we talked about those numbers and everything like that. And, they said at the end, well, can we have a copy of that spreadsheet? And I was like, of course you can have a copy of the spreadsheet. Go for it. And when we talked to them 3 years later, we said, hey, did you guys follow that plan that we laid out in the cost revenue model? And they started laughing, right? And they said, Gene, you're great, but you don't know the ins and outs of this business as well as we do. But what you did show us was this is how you get the payback, and this is how you come up with it. And we did different things than, what you suggested. And I said, well, did you hit your, $7 million goal? And they said, no, we doubled that. And we're now a $30 million company. And we are signing agreements with Australia and Japan to expand, and we'll be a $60 million company in 2 months. Right.
Wow.
So, they understood from that, this is how we make this pay. Right. And it didn't really matter whether or not, they went with the same recommendations that I saw. Right. But I was able to see those things as an outsider looking at their business and doing business analysis of what they were doing. And they were able to take that and grow with it and, go far, far beyond what I ever saw. Had another client that had fleets of C-130 Hercules planes all over the world. And they would sell subscriptions to oil companies in case there was an oil spill. They could fly out into the ocean, wherever it was, and drop, it's not retardant. It makes it dissolve or whatever. They would drop things on it. And if there was a fire, they could drop retardant, in front of the fire and everything like that. They, when I first talked to them, I was saying, how big is your company? And they couldn't really pin it down within $2 or $3 million because they had so many overseas locations and so many different things. And, they're in a highly regulated aeronautical area, and they've got a FAA reports and track which part is on which plane and make sure they've got their maintenance, stuff like that. They were chasing paper so hard all over. And, talk to them 6 months later and, how you guys doing? And they go, well, we found out that when we quit chasing all this paper around, we got time to really look at the business. And we realized that if we had jets instead of prop planes, we could double the size of the subscription area with the same plane because we could get it there faster, further faster, and everything like that. And they were just going great guns. And that's a key thing. I was at the NetSuite annual convention, and they were talking about automating all these processes to get the numbers into the system so that your accountants can do analysis rather than just typing in numbers and stuff like that. And that was a perfect example of that. Years and years ago, we used to say you can cut your head count by 30% if you automate, right? Mm-hmm. That never really happened because there's a lot of work to putting in the ERP, and then you're still running the business, then it's starting to grow and stuff. So you don't really ever say we're going to cut head count, right? But what you can say is we can redeploy people into areas where they can add value to the organization. And that's key. It gets, all of these folks in finance, they've got advanced degrees. They are smart folks, but you take them down to the lowest common denominator when they're just putting in data all the time. Right. Mm-hmm. So now they can go out and they can see things like, hey, we could get twice as fast with jet engines than we can prop planes. Right. And it just opens up all kinds of new things for the company.
It's amazing what you can do when you can see. Like well, with Dry Run, we're a forecasting software, right? So
right.
That's what people see. And I remember a story, and this was actually, I think this may have been last year, that one of our advisors came in, like a CFO advisor to an external business. And we're saying, well, we've got to get this in because unfortunately we're building a forecast to figure out how we're going to roll this company up because they're not going to survive. And we talked with them a few weeks later, and they said, yeah, we got everything in the dry run and we figured out how to save the company. And it's just, we just didn't see it. But when you can model it out, also like, holy cow, I think there's a way forward here. And it's amazing what people can do when you can get them out of the weeds and they can lift their head up and look, right?
Yeah.
And those are benefits that I imagine are harder to, because I know a lot of stuff we're talking about, it's all down to dollars and cents and it's hard to quantify. But that was something I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about was when businesses are making a decision, there's also got to be this point where it can't just be dollars and cents, but there's also, is your staff on the front lines going to hate it or are they going to love it?
Right.
And when you get up to the C-suite, can they understand, and are they spending time talking about the business or talking about getting an explanation on what they're looking at?
Yeah. And, we're looking at all this AI coming in and everything like that. And, a lot of people are using older software that, dates back to the 1980s and stuff like that. And when they want a new report, they got to pay a consultant to come in and, it never really a lot of times it doesn't turn out exactly what you wanted. And now you need another report. We talked about that. They just can't get their numbers. They can't figure out what's going on. Right. Yeah. And when we look at AI, what are we going to base this AI on? What kind of data are we going to input into the system? Because even though it's the latest, greatest, most wonderful stuff, we still have the same thing. We had the first computer that came out, garbage in, garbage out. Right.
Exactly.
So, a lot of people are finally seeing that, hey, we could continue to run with this same stuff, but, things are coming. And those are the people that are taking proactive actions and stuff like that. They don't rely so much on the cost revenue model and the value justification there. But you know what? It's still nice to see that we are going to have some labor savings with this new system, and we do see a payback for it. That may not be why we're doing it, but it really makes sense to at least have it there to justify this big expense that's going on. One of the I was working with Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory, right, and they do hand dipped chocolates, and They are in malls all over the country, and it's all from a little place in Durango, Colorado. And they used to have a Monday morning meeting to figure out which products to make, right? And they got all their managers in there, and they started at 9:30, and it went to 2 p.m, something like that. And then they would go out and they would have the schedule for the week, and they would make the products. We had this advanced planning and scheduling system that was able to change that from the entire management all day long to one guy in 1 hour. It made a big difference, right? Now he was looking at the sales orders that came in and everything like that, and just pulling together masses of information that would, you can do it manually, right? Mm-hmm. Saw a tortilla manufacturer guy one time, and I don't know if you call them a manufacturer, but they made tortillas, right? And they delivered them to all these restaurants and stores and stuff like that. And the guy had a spreadsheet with 57 tabs, and wow. Each tab was a different client, and it was the cost curve. How far do we have to drive? What's the gas cost? What's the man cost to get it there? And what's the cost of the flour and, the masa and the water, all this kind of stuff, except for he spent all his time updating these 57 spreadsheets. Every time that any cost changed anywhere, he had 57 entries to make. Now, why he didn't have it one spreadsheet that all the tabs feed into, I don't know, but I thought he was a genius when I saw the complexity of each tab in that spreadsheet. And it's like, we can do these things. People complain that, ERP is too expensive. And the answer is, it always is. If you're a small business, it doesn't cost as much because you're not going as far with it, but it's way more than you wanted to pay. And if you're mid-sized business, how do but the thing is, you could go out and buy a ream of a green bar paper and a case of pencils and put 50 people in the room and come up with the same stuff, right? Do you want to pay 50 people to do that all day, right?
Yeah.
That's the big thing. So it's not magic, but it does speed some of that data processing up.
Well, and the real valuable part is when you're talking with someone that truly understands their business and the mechanics of it and the ins and outs on, like, that's almost got to be like, oh yeah, we can change this person's life. This guy's got 57 tabs. We can change his life. But the amazing part is he knows exactly what he needs to see and what is working in his business. That's got to be way less of a challenge doing that than going in and someone says, well, we've been growing at a hyper fast rate and all we know is it's out of control and we don't really know what to do.
Yeah, exactly. And there you've got a learning curve. You got to teach them what's on those 57 spreadsheets, and then here's what replaces it type thing, right? And a lot of times they've never done that. They don't have anybody that does forecasting and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a learning curve there. And when you do see somebody that does have that level of spreadsheets, you go, oh God, this guy's going to love this, and we don't need to sell him on it. He's going to see how he can do it a lot easier and faster.
Yeah. I always bring up a little story here just because I think it's so funny. And one of our clients went from what they called what was so funny is they called it their Friday finance party because they would work on their finances all week. And they plugged into Dry Run and it became like Monday afternoon. It was like, yeah, sweet. But I love that. It was just like Friday finance party. It was just rolling eyes when they would talk about it. So Gene, I think just to kind of sort of get close to wrapping it up here, if you are you are that CFO or controller or in a business and you're going like, we got to make a transition to an ERP, kind of your top three things. Like, I know they should get you engaged, but what are the three things that they should be kind of thinking about that are kind of like the big danger zones?
Number one, you've got to get somebody, myself or whoever, that knows something about ERP to have input straight from the beginning of the project, right? Mm-hmm. Even before you select your software and everything like that. The model of going to the salespeople first, those salespeople are great. The pre-sales guys do these wonderful demos. The day you sign the paperwork, they're gone, right?
Yeah.
Never see them again. you've got to get somebody that knows what the system can do to even ask what the requirements are.
Yeah.
And, you've got a big process that you're getting ready to undertake. You need some project management around that to be able to accomplish all of these things and understand, one of the things that we do is we'll say, okay, we got a demo next week on Monday. And they say, okay, Jim's not in town. Can we push it back a week? And I say, okay, we'll push the go live back a week. And they go, what are you talking about? We haven't even started implementing. It's like, yeah, but if we push back a week, every time one of your people is off, you're going to add 6 months to this project. And, we can always bring Jim up to speed next week of what we saw and get him on board.
Yeah.
So to get people to understand that you need a little bit of panic at the beginning to avoid a lot of panic at the end, right?
Yeah.
And big, IBM used to have this saying. They say you can spend $1 today in planning, you can spend $10 in implementation, fixing it, or you can spend $100 after go live, going back and reworking it. So it's the $110, $100, dollars worth of planning can go a long way, right?
Yeah.
So bring somebody in that knows that, and then follow a good process all the way through. We've got a lot of information on our website, and we're starting a podcast series we're talking about all the steps that you go through. We've got 10 different areas that leading companies have done. Now, can I get all of my clients to follow all of those 10 steps? No, they're clients. They do whatever they want, But if you do all of those things, you are more likely, you have a greater probability of having successful product when you finish, right?
Yeah.
It's one client I went into and they said, oh, we don't need a cost revenue model. We know we need this software and everybody knows we need it. You don't have to go out and do that justification. So I skipped it, right? And it's like you skip one of these steps every time, it comes back and bites you in the butt,
Yeah.
And this was a pharma manufacturer. And after we bought the software, while we were in implementation, they failed an FDA test, right? Or they didn't get approval like they thought they were going to get. The owner comes in, fires everybody that's on the R&D side, and brings in his old buddy that he's known for years. That guy was in his 80s. And, he walks in and he says, I don't want you talking to any of my people in operations about ERP because I think it's a waste of time. And anybody that's caught talking to you will be fired. So now we have to implement software with the team that's using it. Now, if I could have said, wait a minute, this is a project that's going to save you guys $20 million over 3 years, it would have been different. It would have been okay. We can give you a little bit of access. We would have had something to fall back on. But just like I say, you skip one of those steps and it comes back to bite you every time.
Yeah. Yes, this has been a wealth of incredibly valuable information, Gene. How can people find you if they want to find Profit from ERP?
Well, we got the Profit from ERP website at www.profitfromerp.com. So that's a start. And reach out to us from there, or at info@profitfromerp. That works as well.
Okay.
And we'll be glad to. I mean, and sometimes in some industries we're not the right guys to do that, so we'll be glad to pass them on to the people that are. If we can help in any way, it's. I hate to see people. I had this one client and I kept going into them and saying, hey guys, we need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do this. And I was with a CPA firm at the time and, wasn't working with them anymore. Found out later that they had gone ahead with the project, and I had already negotiated with the vendor a $200,000 price. They paid $400,000 for it. They recreated the system that they had, and it was just the same mess. And they ended up, the CPA firm, said, "Hey, we can't certify your books. Your accounting is way out of control," and that was just like a disaster, right?
Yeah.
And I hate hearing those stories because it would have been so easy to have me come in and bill 5 hours a week and have some control over that. It would have been
Yeah.
much easier to come in and for 40 hours a week and make sure none of that ever happened. Right.
Yeah.
So, I hate hearing those stories because it would be so easy to fix. So anyway,
it's it's always in hindsight, and it's like, hey, if you're doing this, you've got an opportunity to learn from other people's
right.
other people's hindsight and do it right the first time.
And like the controller I was telling you about, that wanted one person to come in and one consultant to fix all of their issues. You don't even know what you don't know yet,
Yeah.
So we're playing in this, we're swimming in this pond constantly for 25 years, right? We've seen this kind of stuff before, and it's easy to avoid. So anyway, whether it's us or another good software consulting company, I don't know of any other good ones.
Perfect way to end it. Oh, thank you so much, Gene. This has been such an interesting conversation, and I'm sure people will be tracking you down and chatting with you about this because and you answered even a lot of my questions, because there's a lot of depth there that I've seen those types of issues in organizations before, but to be able to kind of mash the two together, it really helps me get an understanding. So I really appreciate the time.
You got it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for joining us. And again, I'm Blaine with Dry Run. If you're looking for a way to forecast, like I said, cash flow, model scenarios, work with your team on budgeting, work with a whole pile of people and make it easy, make it elegant, make it ultra fast, just come and visit us at dryrun.com, and we'd love to show you what we have. Thanks so much.